Hello everyone, welcome to the presentation for Professional Engineering Licensure. My name is Javier Perez Jr. and let's get started. So a brief overview of what I want to cover today. I want to start with a brief introduction of myself and my credentials and basically get you guys a feel of why I feel qualified to talk to you about this. Then I want to answer 3 questions regarding the professional engineering license. One is, what is it? How do I get it? And why do I need it? I then want to go over a few other considerations, and I want to end things with some tips and tricks on exam preparation, what you could expect, and some of the things you're allowed to bring with you. Okay. So a little bit about myself. My name is Javier Perez Jr. I am a PE in the state of Texas. I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering in 2012 from Texas A&M University in Kingsville. Kingsville is in the South Texas region, close to Corpus Christi. I then moved to Houston to work in oil and gas from 2012 to 2017. I started off with a company called Cameron, which later became OneSubsea, and now it is all under the Schlumberger umbrella. So first question, what is a PE license? Well, in short, it is a professional license or title for engineers. According to the National Society of Professional Engineers, it is the highest standard of competence, basically a great symbol of achievement in the engineering profession. So a little bit of history behind PE licensing. In 1937, a school in New London, Texas, blew up. This led to a change in the Texas legislature, which in turn led to the creation of the Texas Board of Professional Engineers. From what I understand of the story, there was a gas leak in the basement of the school, and I believe the electrical systems were not designed properly. And so when a maintenance worker went in to plug in a tool, well, he did so not knowing that it was full of gas, and unfortunately that resulted in the explosion. After that happened, they kind of figured that whoever would be working in this kind of building and the design and development of it should probably know what they're doing, and hence the PE license was born. So I want to also touch up on this workflow, and this is a very quick reference to see whether or not you need, or better yet, a project needs a PE stamp. But I'm going to come back to this one. Okay, so I think the biggest question most people would be asking is, okay, well, how do I get it? Well, I would wager that the majority of people watching this video are already in step 1, which is to obtain an engineering degree. Okay? Then what you have to do is pass the FE exam, apply to become an EIT. The reason why I have this as a separate item is because when I passed the FE exam, I thought I was automatically in the EIT, and I was mistaken. Once you pass the FE exam, all you have to do is apply for the certificate. It's pretty straightforward. The next step I would say is one that most people would also naturally go to, and that is to get a job. And so part of that is to gain work experience. Typically for engineers, for a PE license, you need 4 years, but there are some exceptions, and I'll go over them in a bit. As you're working, you need to create something called a supplemental experience record, or an SER. You also have to take an online ethics exam, pass the PE exam, and finally apply for your license. Also, I just wanted to go over that some of these steps are under different governing bodies. For example, the exams are under NCEES, whereas any applications and the ethics exam are under the Texas Board of Professional Engineering. Okay, just a quick note. PE application also requires a criminal background check and endorsement from 3 PEs who quote-unquote supervised your work. And I'm going to go over what supervised work is. So I want to make this clear. Supervised work doesn't mean that your direct supervisor has to be a PE. Basically, it is as long as a current PE has knowledge of what you've been doing and can attest to your experience, that counts as supervised work. It doesn't have to be your direct supervisor. As a matter of fact, let's make an assumption that if, for example, I'm working under someone and I'm a PE and they're not, but because we're working together, if that person later decides to get their PE license, even though they're my supervisor, I could sign off on their SER. So that's just a quick little anecdote. Another thing to keep in mind is that the order, as I presented earlier, isn't completely definitive. There are a lot of exceptions to this order. For example, I took my FE exam on my senior year in college. So I actually passed the exam before I graduated. So in that sense, the first 2 steps were flipped for me. And again, and this is just my personal experience, I actually got my EIT certificate after I got my work experience, but it still counts as my PE. It counts towards my PE, that is. Again, this order isn't set in stone as long as you meet all the requirements. There are a lot of ways to go about it. And another thing, I think in the past, the PE, for you to take the PE exam, it required you to have a pending PE application. This is no longer the case. The PE has been decoupled. Sorry, the PE exam has been decoupled from the application. That means that now you can take it anytime after you pass your FE exam. And finally, last question, why do you need it? Well, certain projects, especially in the public sector, require a PE stamp in the project's documentation. That being drawings or design files, typically drawings. I've mostly only seen it in drawings, but that's one consideration. But you might think, well, what if I don't want to work in the public sector? Or what if I don't want to work with something that affects the public? Well, in most cases, a PE license does stand out to a potential employer. And again, it's recognized as a symbol of competence. So it's still not bad to have on your resume. And still, some of you might think, okay, well, you know what? I'm not interested in working in the public sector. And quite frankly, I don't think I really care about having it on my resume. So I don't think the PE license is for me. Well, to those people, I'd just like to say, you're absolutely right. In many cases, especially in the private sector, a PE is just not required. So if you decide that that's not the course of action for you, there's really nothing wrong with that. I would still kind of lean towards encouraging people who can to go ahead and do it, just because, like I said, it at least looks good. It's something to help build your resume as well. But again, it's not required. So let's look at the old workflow again. And I'm just going to go over this briefly. And I apologize for the small lettering. This is as big as I could get it in this slide. But let's go over it. Okay, so if a project affects the public, if it's a public works project, it asks, is electrical or mechanical engineering involved? If yes, does the project exceed $8,000? If that is yes, then you need a PE stamp on the documentation. If it doesn't include electrical or mechanical engineering, will expenses for completed project exceed $20,000? In most cases, especially when it comes to roadworks or bridges and stuff like that, the answer is yes. Again, PE license is required. Or better yet, a PE stamp is required for that documentation. Again, if the answer is no for either of those cases, then you don't need a PE license. If it's in the private sector, this is, I think, primarily for civil engineering. It says, is it a private dwelling? If yes, private dwelling, farm, or ranch. If yes, then you don't need a PE. If no, if it's an apartment or condo, and if it's over 2 stories tall, or if it is 2 stories tall but has over 4 units, then you still need a PE stamp. If it's 1 story and is over 8 units, again, you still need a PE stamp. If none of those conditions are met, then you don't need a PE stamp. If it's any other type of building, commercial building, over 1 story or over 5,000 square feet, or have a span of over 24 feet, then some kind of PE stamp is required. Okay, so now I just want to go over a few other considerations that people should keep in mind when making the decision as to whether or not they want to get their engineering license and what comes along with it. Just kind of going over things that I may not have covered. So one is, are there any downsides to being a PE? Well, it's not, I wouldn't exactly say it's terribly expensive, but it's not exactly free. The application process may get a bit expensive, approximately $650 total, but this doesn't include the degree, the preparation materials, or renewals. This is another big one, is that as a PE, your contact information becomes public record. Is an engineering degree always required to obtain a PE? The answer might surprise you. That is, no, actually. There are some exceptions. If you have a relevant scientific degree like physics or mathematics, basically anything within STEM, you could still become a PE, but this will extend the number of years of experience required to 8 years. Does your engineering degree have to be from an accredited institution? Again, no, it doesn't have to be. You could still become a PE even if your engineering degree isn't accredited, but it will extend the number of years of experience required to 8, just like if it was any other STEM career path. Is 4 years of experience the minimum to become a PE? Again, no. The most common exception is if you have a master's or a PhD degree, that may count for up to 2 years of work experience. So you could get it with as little as 2 years of work experience. Can I get my PE without taking the exams? So it is possible, but it is highly unlikely. There are waivers you can get, but again, for someone who's just graduating with a bachelor's degree, it's not very likely. Again, typically it requires a good reason to waive the exams. Most common of which is engineering professors. They figured if you could teach a course in engineering, you probably already know it well enough to where you don't have to take the exam. So another thing to take into consideration is the fact that a PE license has to be renewed annually. This process usually just requires a $40 fee and 15 hours of continuing education. 1 hour must be related to ethics. And many things count as continuing education. Obviously, college credits, professional seminars, special professional development classes. You could even do up to 5 hours of self-study. And there are some companies that'll have their own little internal classes, and you could use that as continuing education as well. So this is a fairly straightforward requirement, and it's not as unreasonable as it may first appear. You need to keep proper documentation of these classes. However, when you renew your PE license, you don't have to prove, or you don't have to have the documentation with you on hand at that time. You don't have to submit it with your renewal, but you do have to keep it in case you get audited. So again, it's not required at the time of renewal. And one easy way to keep track of continuing education hours is a form by the Texas Board of Professional Engineers. It looks like this. It's very straightforward. Just gives you the date, what activity did you do, what organization held it, duration, how many hours, and it gives you a lot of the information that I just gave you down here. As you can see, minimum of 15 PDHs. PDH stands for professional development hour. One must be an ethics course, or 1 hour must be related to ethics, and you could even roll over some of your PDHs to the next year, or from a previous year. Oh, and again, these are kind of like the exchange rates between certain things. For example, if you develop a patent, that counts towards 15 hours. A college 1 hour college semester. 1 college semester hour is 15 PDHs, and 5 hours can be direct self-study. Okay. So moving on with exam preparation. I'm going to start off with the FE exam. So really the only thing you should take to your FE exam is 2 approved calculators. In terms of taking the exam itself, you are only allowed to take up to 2 approved calculators. No pencils, no paper. Basically, pencils, paper, reference manual are all provided, and no cell phones. I cannot stress this enough. I've seen it to where they've kicked people out for using a cell phone, or maybe not using, but like if it rings during the exam, you'll get kicked out. I'd suggest just leave it in your car, leave it at home. Try not to bring it in with you. And obviously, this doesn't include the things that you have to bring with you, such as an ID. But to look at the complete guidelines, you could just click this link. So yeah, these are the NCEES guidelines. It goes over computer-based exams, which typically cover most, if not all, FE exams, and pencil and paper exams, which cover most PE exams. So yeah, just read through these guidelines. They'll tell you what kind of things you need to bring, what things are strictly prohibited, and what things are optional. I think you could bring like earplugs, something that cancels out ambient noise. So yeah, I would suggest to look through this guideline just to get a little more information on what to expect during exam day. I also wanted to go over kind of a brief overview of the calculator policy. Again, this is all in the NCEES website, but effectively this is their calculator policy. These are the calculators you could use for Casio brand, Hewlett-Packard, and TIs. For TIs, which is what I used, I pretty much used the what is it? I think it was TI-30X Multiview or something like that. But yeah, this is effectively the list of approved calculators that you can use. So moving on. So the advice I would have for you is, one, get comfortable with the calculator that you're planning to use. And that's classwork, homework, what have you. Try to use it for as much as you possibly can. You'll also be provided with a reference manual. Try to get familiar with that as well. It has a lot of good information on it, and it's useful not just for the exam, but also for schoolwork. And I've even used it for work as well. So overall, if you can, just try to get a hold of it as soon as you can. Once you register with NCEES, you should be able to download it for free. The reference handbook looks a little something like this. Again, it goes over ethics, a lot of mathematics stuff. It's this giant crib sheet that you could use during your FE exam. It goes over chemistry, material science, statics, dynamics. Let's try dynamics. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, it's just a good reference overall. And also, I would also recommend that you find the specific outline for your discipline and focus on the stuff that you know will be on the exam. And what I mean by that is this. So, for example, this is an outline for the FE exam for mechanical engineering, and it tells you, okay, you'll have anywhere between 6 and 9 questions in mathematics, and they'll cover analytic geometry, calculus, linear algebra, numerical methods. Basically what they mean by this is they may cover any of these topics, so that's what you should focus your studying on. Computational tools, spreadsheets, flow charts, ethics, engineering, economy, electricity and magnetism. It's all here. Basically, if you're worried about something and you don't find it on this list, I wouldn't worry about it too much. So yeah, I think it's a pretty comprehensive guide and it's very specific as to what you should focus your studying on. So use that to your advantage. Also, there is a company called PPI, which is an unofficial provider for reference material. And what I mean by that is that they provide really good reference materials for these exams. However, they're not affiliated with NCEES. And actually, I'm not sure if they really like them all that much, just because they make studying maybe a little bit too easy or a little too straightforward. So anyway, so that's PPI, and I'll go over their website in a bit. If possible, purchase their review manual for your discipline. It's about $150. Review what you need to work on, and then purchase the practice exam for your discipline from the NCEES website. That should only be a $30. It should only have a $30 price tag. When you take the exam, try to time yourself and keep in mind that you only have about 3 minutes for each question. So keep that in mind as well. If you cannot give yourself 6 hours to take the full exam, try to kind of calculate the amount of time you do have available to study and try to answer only those questions. For example, if you only have 30 minutes to study, well, 3 minutes per question times 10 is 30. So try to answer 10 questions within those 30 minutes. Each question is worth the same, so it is recommended that you skip the questions you don't know and start with those you do. After you're done with the practice exam, focus your studying on what you got wrong in the practice exam. So let me just go to the PPI website real quick, and I'll show you what the practice exam looks like. So there we go. This should be PPI. Yeah. So this is the reference manual that I was looking at. $150. This is the mechanical engineering one, but there are a few for. There are quite a few. There should be one for each discipline. So this is the practice exam. Notice the price tag here. If you go to NCES itself, yeah, price tag is a little bit cheaper here. It should be the same thing too. So now moving on to PE exam preparation. Again, just like the FE exam, you're only allowed to bring 2 approved calculators to help with the exam. Pencils and exam booklets are provided. Notice that this time I didn't mention reference material, and I'm going to go over why in a bit. Keep in mind, no cell phones. Again, I've seen someone get kicked out because their cell phone went off. I do want to take this time to let you guys know, they give you a fair warning. They tell you several times to turn off your cell phone and give it to a proctor. So, I mean, at that point, it's kind of on you whether or not you want to follow those instructions or not. So yeah, no cell phones. See NCES for complete guidelines. Again, we've already seen that. Get comfortable with the calculator you're planning on using. So, going back to the references. This is an open book exam, so try your best to become familiar with whatever references you're planning on using. Again, just like with the FE, the PE also has specific discipline outlines to focus on. So try to find your own and yeah, focus on the stuff you want to study. Or better yet, focus on the stuff that you know will be on the test that you need to study. So going back to this, here you go. This is just the guidelines for exams. So this is what the outline looks like for a PE exam. If you notice, it's got a lot of similar information from that of the FE. I would say the PEs are typically, at least for mechanical engineers, they're typically a little more focused. For example, notice we don't have designated mathematics section anymore. We have principles, so basics, material properties, strength of materials, and applications. And yeah, that should be it. And the calculator policy is the same as the FE exam. Okay. So don't be surprised if you see someone preparing for the PE exam or taking the PE exam. If they have a suitcase full of books, that's exactly what. That's pretty much par for the course. That's most people who went in either went in with wagons full of books, crates. I took a suitcase. Most people did. Yeah. So this is par for the course. Just a few things I wanted to point out when it came to your reference material. You could use any bound book. You cannot take loose paper in, and you cannot have handwritten notes written in pencil. You can have handwritten notes written in pen, and I think the reasoning behind that is because you're provided with a pencil during the exam, you could write down or copy down a question in one of your reference materials and essentially take the exam out. And they don't want you to do that. So instead, they limit any handwritten notes to pen. That way they know, hey, well, that person has handwritten notes, but it's in pen, so chances are they didn't write these notes while they were in this room, so they're good to go. Again, I also mentioned no loose paper, but notice this binder. If there are some notes that you want to print out, you can do so, but they have to be bound within the binder. This binder itself had a little sleeve for a cover page. I could not bring that cover page into the exam with me because it's loose. Again, as long as it's bound, and as long as anything that's handwritten is written in ink, you're good to go. You could take as many things as you want, but yeah, those are the restrictions. Okay? So moving on, like before, PPI is the unofficial provider for reference material for the PE exam. Just like the FE exam, they also have a reference manual for the PE exam. That's a little bit steeper. It's about $275. Again, review the material you need to work on. Purchase the practice exam from NCEES. This time it'll be about $40 for the PE. And again, time yourself when you take the exam. In this case, it's a longer exam, but you do have 6 minutes for each question. So like before, if you have only a set amount of time, try to consider how many questions you need to answer within that set amount of time. But if you could sit through 8 hours and take the practice exam in one sitting, try to do that as well. I think that's better preparation for the exam anyway. And just like before, each question is worth the same, so it's recommended that you skip the questions you don't know and start with those you do. And after you're done with the exam, or the practice exam that is, focus the majority of your study on what you got wrong, and just keep going at it until your exam date. Typically, so a lot of people ask me, how long do you prepare for? I think most people, including myself, typically prepare for about 2 or 3 months in advance. So for example, I had my PE exam in October. Actually, I think I had my FE exam in October as well. And I think I started preparing around July or August. One of those 2 months, I can't remember. But yeah, so if you could give yourself 2 or 3 months in advance to start preparing, I think that's what most people do. Most people do. So just a few other strategies when it comes to exam preparation. I want to bring up the fact that there are also third-party institutions available to help you prepare for the exam. Most common of which is Test Masters. I took one called School of PE, and they typically range from between $1,000 and $2,000. Now some people might ask me, is it worth it? Now, they definitely do help. I want to make that absolutely clear. And sometimes if you could get your company to pay for it, I say go right ahead and take one of those courses. Now, if you're paying out of pocket, it definitely helps, but is it worth $1,000? I'm not convinced that it is, if I'm being honest. This is just my personal opinion, but that's my humble opinion. I don't think it's worth $1,000. I think you could find a lot of that stuff on YouTube or by asking your professor. So that brings me to my next point. A lot of the study material, I feel like you could find tutorials on YouTube. I know for my FE exam, where I went and got my undergraduate degree, the professors actually got together and they would give classes to help prepare students for the FE exam. So that might be something that you could ask your professors about. But yeah, keep in mind your professors are a good resource as well. Try to look for them for help. And that's where I would like to end this presentation. Now, typically I give this presentation in person, and I usually open it up for questions at this point. However, due to the nature of this presentation and due to the current circumstances, I will be ending the presentation here. However, if you do have any questions, then feel free to include them in the comments, and I can't promise when I'll be able to get to them, but I'll try to get to them eventually. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and good luck on your future endeavors if you guys plan on getting your PE license eventually. I wish you the best of luck. And if you do, and even if you don't, again, best of luck to you guys, and thanks for watching.